She introduced her triplets on New Year's Day. The Billionaire CEO went silent. He didn't choke when he made his first billion. He choked when he saw the three children who had his face. On New Year's Day, in a ballroom full of cameras and champagne, I introduced my triplets to the man who walked out the night I told him I was pregnant. My dignity, their identity, and his spotless empire were all on the line in that one breathless moment. He had no script for this, and what he didn't say in front of that crowd would haunt him for the rest of his life. If you've ever carried a whole family on your back while the man who left you got credit for building something, you're going to feel this down in your bones. Stay, because once you hear what happened after that silence, you'll never look at a disappearing man or a quiet grandmother the same way again. New Year's Day is supposed to sound like laughter and champagne, not silence sharp enough to cut through bone. But the moment I said their names, the whole room froze. This is Beverly. This is Carlton, and this is Luke. My voice echoed around the marble ballroom like a secret that had run out of places to hide. Across the room, under crystal chandeliers and a wall of cameras, Ramon Collins, billionaire CEO, media darling, the man who once traced forever on my skin stopped breathing. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at my three children as if the past had walked in wearing small shoes and borrowed courage. Beverly's hand tightened around mine. Carlton's jaw, his father's jaw, lifted like a shield. Luke just watched, quiet and steady, the way he always does when the world gets too loud. Someone near the stage dropped a glass. The clink shattered the hush and whispers poured in where bravery should have been. Who are those kids? Do you see the resemblance? Is that her? The host, Jennifer Sanders, stepped forward in sequins and practiced charm, tapping the microphone like she was knocking on the surface of a bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, she smiled, too wide, Mr. Collins is asked to acknowledge some special guests tonight. Special. Interesting word for a woman he left and three children he never met. He still hadn't spoken. Just stared, color draining from his face, fingers flexing at his sides like he was trying to hold on to the version of his life that didn't include us. I could feel my heartbeat in my mouth. 10 years of swallowing my story pressed against my teeth, begging to be released. I stepped forward before fear could change its mind. Happy New Year, Ramon. My voice was calmer than I felt, controlled, measured, the tone of a woman who has cried all her tears in private and come back dry. He blinked like coming out of a trance. Miriam, you didn't tell me. I almost laughed. The sound stayed in my chest. I did, I said softly. You were just too busy becoming a billionaire to hear me. The whisper sharpened. Someone lifted a phone. Then 3, then 10. If you've ever watched a man try to rewrite history in front of witnesses, you know this feeling. And if a part of you is already thinking, I need to hear how this ends, you might want to hit subscribe now so you don't lose this channel when life pulls you away later. We tell stories here for women who've survived more than we ever said out loud. He glanced at the cameras, then back at me. This isn't the place. I shook my head. Silence had 10 years. Tonight belongs to the truth. I placed a hand on each of my children's shoulders. Ramon Collins, I said, the word steady even as my chest trembled. Meet Beverly, Carlton, and Luke. Your triplets. The music died. The air thinned. Nothing, no explosion, just silence. Not the kind that protects, the kind that finally convicts. He opened his mouth once more, then closed it. Somewhere behind us, Jennifer tried to patch the moment with nervous laughter, but the room had already chosen its headline. We left before midnight. The new year didn't need fireworks. It had this. As the doors closed behind us, I could feel my old life sealing itself on the other side. What I didn't know then? That this was just the first crack in a wall we'd built out of fear, ambition, and unfinished sentences. The headlines would later call him a man blindsided by secrets. Funny how nobody ever writes about the women who warned them years before the cameras arrived. Before the money, before the silence, before the triplets turned my body into a battlefield and my heart into a shelter, there was just us, Ramon and Miriam. Two people in a too-bright library, arguing over statistics notes and sharing dreams bigger than our bank accounts. He was all edges and energy back then, sketching ideas on napkins, tapping his foot whenever his brain ran faster than his words. I was the opposite, organized, measured, the girl with color-coded binders and a secret tenderness for impossible men. Let me borrow your notes, he'd ask, leaning on my table. You can borrow a pen, I'd reply, not looking up. The rest you earn. He loved that. That I didn't bend just because his smile took up enough space for two people. We were young enough to believe that love plus hard work could outmuscle anything. We'd sit on the floor in that library, backs against the wall, talking about the future like we were placing a custom order. His startup, my graduate degree, a small apartment with cracked tiles and plants that never quite died. When this company takes off, he'd say, eyes shining, I'll make sure you never work another exhausted day in your life, Miriam. I'd laugh. If you think I'm giving up my degree because you learned to pay rent on time, you're delirious. We thought we were so wise. We didn't know life was listening and taking notes. The day I found out I was pregnant, the world went strangely quiet. I sat in the doctor's office staring at the test, feeling the floor tilt under my feet. A baby. I walked home slowly, one hand pressed to my stomach like I could hold the news in place until I was ready. He was at the office, buried in investors and code and promises. We need to talk tonight, I texted. Big pitch tomorrow. Can it wait? He replied. Could it? No. I told him yes anyway. When I finally told him 2 days later, I thought my heart might climb out of my chest. I stood in his cluttered office, holding the word pregnant between us like something fragile and holy. A baby? He repeated, eyes wide. I nodded. Yes. He walked around the desk and pulled me into his arms, laughing into my hair. We'll figure it out, he promised. We always do. For a week he was wonderful. He made late-night food runs, walked me to class, Googled stroller brands he couldn't afford yet. Maybe you know that feeling, that brief golden window where you truly think, this might just work out. If you do, tell me in the comments how long it lasted for you. There's comfort in knowing we weren't the only ones who believed too hard, too early. The first ultrasound changed everything. The room smelled like disinfectant and anticipation. The technician frowned at the screen, then smiled. Are you ready for a surprise? I gripped the edge of the table. I suppose I have to be. Well, she said, turning the monitor slightly, I see 2 heartbeats. Twins. I laughed. I cried. I tried to picture 2 tiny cribs squeezed into our tiny living room. And, hold on, she added, leaning closer. There's a third. 3 hearts, 3 lives, 3 futures resting inside a woman who was already tired from carrying just her own. I drove straight to his office, ultrasound photo crumpling slightly in my hand from how tightly I held it. He was mid-meeting. I walked in anyway. He excused his team, closed the glass door, and looked at me like I was the only one who existed. What's wrong? Nothing, I whispered. Everything. I held up the picture hand, shaking. There are 3. His face shifted not with joy at first, but with calculation. I watched him try to rearrange his life in his head and not find enough space. 3? He repeated, the word dry on his tongue. Yes, I tried to laugh. We're apparently overachievers. He didn't laugh. He sat down slowly, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Do you know what this means? He asked. It means we'll need more diapers, I tried again, and a bigger couch. And it means, he cut in, voice tight, investors will see this as a liability. I'm barely holding this company together as it is. A pregnant founder with triplets? There it was. Fear dressed up as logic. I don't need your investors, I said quietly. I need you. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw at the part of him that would one day walk away instead of sit with discomfort. I can't do this right now, he whispered. Not like this. You know that moment when your body understands before your mind does? I felt something fall inside me. I'm not asking for perfect, I said. Just presents, ka. He stood, grabbed his jacket, eyes wet but jaws set like stone. You won't be alone. I'll send money. And just like that, the man who once promised forever walked out on the rest of our lives. If any part of you is watching this thinking, this is exactly why I stopped trusting promises, you're not alone here. Click subscribe if you want a corner of YouTube that actually tells the whole story mess, courage, bad choices and all. We're building that together, one chapter at a time. The money did come, right on time. Cold, silent, punctual. He didn't. Months blurred, swollen feet, aching back, Ruth moving in without being asked. Nights where all I could do was press my hand to my belly and whisper, you are wanted. Even if he never comes back, you are wanted. Labor came on a stormy night. The sky ripped open. So did I. Beverly First's stern little brow already creased like she had opinions. Carlton necks lungfuls of protest, fists balled as if ready to fight for a world he hadn't seen yet. Luke laughed slow, steady, as if he'd already decided rushing was overrated. 3 tiny bodies. No father's hand to cut the cord. I lay there afterward, exhausted, covered in equal parts sweat and holy awe, staring at them lined up in clear hospital cribs. "This is us now," I whispered. "You and me. We start here." And in that moment I knew my life had split in two, the part where I waited for him to grow up and the part where I did. Strength doesn't always look like speeches and stages. Sometimes it looks like 3 a.m. in an old t-shirt, bouncing one baby on your shoulder while another pulls your hair and the third decides now is the perfect time to need everything at once. Those first years were a blur of the kind that only mothers and night shift nurses truly understand. Beverly refused to sleep unless my hand rested on her chest. Carlton would scream himself hoarse if his bottle was even a minute late. Luke would lie there quietly, eyes tracking the ceiling like he was tracing invisible constellations only he could see. Ruth moved through it all like a seasoned general. "Pass me that," she'd say, catching a bottle mid-fall. "You sit down before you faint," she'd order, even as she rocked a crying baby with her foot and folded laundry with her hands. We laughed sometimes, because if we didn't, we'd drown. The money Ramon sent helped pay for formula and clinics, but it didn't soothe fevers or sing lullabies. There are some jobs only a body that stayed can do. When the triplets turned 3, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and did a double take. There were more lines around my eyes, yes, but also a steadiness that hadn't been there before. A woman who knew what she'd survived and wasn't ashamed of it. That was around the time I realized I had a choice. Let what he did to us be the end of my story, or let it be the reason I helped other women rewrite theirs. So I started small. Secondhand baby clothes for other single moms. Carpools. Listening. A lot of listening. One night, after a group meeting in our tiny living room, a woman hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You make me feel less stupid," she whispered. Less thrown away. After she left, I sat at the table while the kids slept and wrote 2 words at the top of a page: "Rise again." That became the name of the nonprofit, our home base for mothers who'd been left holding more than just bills. If you're watching this and thinking, "I've got a story like that in me too, but I've never told it," drop a small heart in the comments or write someday. You don't owe anyone your details, but even that tiny signal says, "I'm here. I survived." Rise Again grew faster than I was ready for. Church basements turned into rented offices. Donations trickled, then poured. Articles were written about the brave founder who turned abandonment into advocacy. They said my name in rooms where his used to be the only one echoing. But every public success had a private cost. There were nights I'd stand in the doorway of the kids' room, watching them sleep, wondering if I was giving them enough or just giving everything I had left and hoping it would be. Their personalities unfolded slowly, like handwritten letters. Beverly lined her stuffed animals in perfect rows, scolding Carlton if he knocked them out of order. Carlton once shoved a boy twice his size for calling his sister strange. Luke would sit between them, gently redirecting arguments, suggesting trades like a tiny diplomat. Sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary day cutting crusts off sandwiches, tying shoelaces, I'd catch a flash of Ramon in them. Beverly's focused frown. Carlton's quick temper. Luke's habit of going quiet when he was thinking hard. It hurt. It healed, often at the same time. Years passed. They grew into themselves. I grew into a woman who no longer measured her worth by who stayed, but by who she chose to be when people left. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived. Thick paper. Familiar logo, the Cullens Foundation. I turned it over twice before opening it. Inside was an invitation, all formal language and careful praise for the work Rise Again was doing for single mothers. They wanted to honor me at their New Year's gala. Honor. The word sat bitter on my tongue. Beverly found me standing at the counter, letter in hand. "Mom," she asked, "you're doing the forehead wrinkle." What happened? I handed her the envelope. She read it slowly, lips moving just a little the way they did when she concentrated. "Is this him?" she asked quietly. Carlton appeared in the doorway, already suspicious. Luke didn't come closer. He leaned in the hall, listening. He always listens. "Yes," I said finally, "it's his event." The room felt smaller suddenly. Beverly swallowed. "Are we going?" I looked at my children, these 3 lives I had raised without the man whose name was embossed on that paper. "I haven't decided," I admitted. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your peace and standing in your truth, you know how heavy that kind of decision feels. If this is hitting close to home, like this video, so it reaches another woman standing on that same edge tonight. That night, after they went to bed, I sat at the table with Ruth. She read the letter, then set it down gently. "You don't owe them anything," she said. "I know," I replied, "but maybe I owe me something, and them." She looked toward the hallway where 3 small breaths rose and fell behind closed doors. "If you go," she said, "don't go as the girl who begged him to stay. Go as the woman who did it without him." I held the invitation a long time. Then I nodded. "I'll go." I didn't know yet that walking into that ballroom would crack open the next chapter of our lives. All I knew in that moment was this: I was done hiding from a man who'd already taken too much. The week before the gala, the invitation sat on the counter like a dare I hadn't fully accepted. Every time I passed it, my chest tightened. Not from fear of seeing Ramon, but from the weight of what this would mean for my children. The night before New Year's Eve, I called them into the living room. Beverly sat up straight on the edge of the couch. Carlton sprawled with his arms crossed, already suspicious of anything involving fancy clothes. Luke tucked his feet underneath him and waited without speaking. "We've been invited to an event," I started. "It's important, and he will be there." I didn't have to say his name. They knew. "Do we have to go?" Carlton asked, jaw tensing. "No," I said honestly. "We don't have to do anything. But I'm tired of living like we're the ones who should be hidden." Beverly's eyes softened. "So if we go as us?" "As us," I nodded. "No apologies." Luke finally spoke. "If we go, will he see us?" "Yes," I said. "He'll see you. All of you." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Beverly took a breath. "I want to go," Carlton groaned. "Seriously?" She looked at him steady. "I want to see his face." Luke nodded slowly. "Me too. Sometimes courage is just a family decision to stop running. If you've ever had to walk back into a room you once left in tears, tell me in the comments how you did it, or just write "I went back." You never know who might draw strength from your story. New Year's Day arrived draped in gray clouds and cold air. Ruth helped the kids get dress little adjustments here and there, wiping imaginary smudges from their shoes, kissing their foreheads like armor. She turned to me last. "You look like yourself," she said, fastening the clasp of my simple necklace. "Not who he remembers, who you actually are." We drove in silence most of the way, city lights blinking like half-remembered promises. The hotel towered over the street glass and steel and money. My children stepped out of the car with their backs straight, hands a little sweaty in mine. Inside, the ballroom glowed gold crystal chandeliers, polished floors, laughter that didn't sound entirely honest. I felt eyes on us immediately. The founder of Rise Again, the Triplets, the missing father's ghost. "Stay close," I murmured. Beverly slipped her hand into mine. Carlton scouted the room with narrowed eyes. Luke looked everywhere and nowhere at once. Then I saw him. Ramon stood near the stage, surrounded by donors and admirers. His suit was perfect, his smile practiced, but something in his posture was weary. For a moment, all I saw was the boy from the library hiding his fear behind ambition. Then he turned and saw us. It was like watching a man get hit by a wave he thought he'd escaped. Color drained from his face. His posture faltered. The host's voice rang out above the music. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we ring in the new year, Mr. Collins would like to recognize someone very special." Of course he would. Control the narrative. Own the Shane. But this time the story didn't belong to him. I stepped forward before my courage could evaporate. My heels clicked on the marble, each step a memory of every night I'd walked alone. When I reached the space where the crowd parted, I looked up at him. "Happy New Year, Ramon." And the room held its breath. The moment his name left my lips, the world seemed to slow. Ramon's gaze dropped from my face to Beverly, then to Carlton, then to Luke. His eyes widened with every feature he recognized like a debt come due. Beverly's expression stayed calm, but her fingers dug into my palm. Carlton's jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind. Luke tilted his head just slightly, studying Ramon like a puzzle he already half solved. "Miriam," Ramon finally said, voice hoarse. "You didn't tell me." Several people near us exhaled at once, feeders of gossip relieved to hear a line they could repeat later. I met his eyes. "I told you. You just chose your company over hearing me." A woman near the front gasped. Phones came up, discreet but not really. Jennifer laughed nervously into the mic. Well, it seems we've got Jennifer, Ramon cut in, not looking away from me. Give us a moment. She faltered, then plastered on a PR smile. Of course. We'll take a brief pause. The band stopped. The room hummed with curiosity. This is not the place, he whispered. For 10 years there was no place, I replied. So tonight this will do. I set my hands gently on my children's shoulders. These are your children, Ramon. Your triplets. No one misheard me. The words hit every corner of that ballroom. He stared at them, then at me, like adding up an equation he wished didn't make sense. For long seconds he said nothing. No denial. No claim. Just silence. If you've ever watched someone finally meet the consequences of their choices, you know that silence. It's heavy. If this is stirring up your own memories, pause for a moment, then tap like not for the pain, but because you know what it costs to stand this calmly in it. We should talk privately, he said finally. Away from all this. I nodded once. We will, but not instead of this. In addition to it, because my children were watching, and they needed to see that truth doesn't always shout, but it doesn't bow either. We didn't stay much longer. Once the first wave of curiosity broke, I led them out. Outside, in the cool night air, Carlton finally exploded. He just stood there, he said, fists balled, like we were some kind of surprise he didn't order. He looked scared, Luke murmured. He should be, Beverly added quietly. We're real now. At home, when they were in bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. No calls, no messages, just the echo of his stunned silence in that ballroom. I asked myself the question every woman asks after she finally speaks up. Did I do the right thing? There's no tidy answer to that. Only this. My children saw me tell the truth with my head up. 2 days later, sometime between making tea and sorting through nonprofit emails, my phone rang. Unknown number. Miriam. His voice on the other end was lower, stripped of audience and polish. Please. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. I could have said no. Some part of me wanted to. But healing isn't just about what we say. It's about what we're brave enough to hear. Tomorrow, I said. A cafe, public, 10 a.m., don't be late. The cafe was small and warm, the kind of place where people come to think, not perform. I chose a corner table where I could see the door. Old habit, always needing to see what's coming. He arrived on time. No entourage. No expensive watch flash, just so. Just a man in a dark coat, carrying 10 years of unspoken words in the lines around his eyes. Thank you for coming, he said. You asked, I replied. I'm listening. That's all this is. He sat, fingers laced together like he was holding onto something fragile. I saw them, he whispered, in that ballroom. I knew immediately. Yes, I said. It would be hard not to. He let out a shaky breath. I told myself for years that I didn't know, that I wasn't sure, that you'd moved on. You told yourself whatever lets you sleep at night, I said quietly. I was awake. For a while he just listened as I spoke. I told him about the pregnancy, the fear, the ultrasound, the technician's voice counting heartbeats beyond what I thought I could carry. I told him about calling him and getting logic instead of love. About his promise to send money like that could cradle 3 crying infants at once. I told him about Ruth selling her jewelry, about working on grant applications with a baby on my lap and another tugging my sleeve, about the nights I was so tired I'd stand in the hall between their rooms, hands braced on the door frames, reminding myself I wasn't allowed to fall. He didn't interrupt, not once. Tears gathered in his eyes, but he held them there as if he knew he hadn't earned the right to let them fall yet. I was afraid, he said finally, of losing everything I'd built, of being seen as irresponsible, of failing. You did fail, I said. No malice. Just fact. He nodded slowly. Yes, I did. I failed you. I failed them. And then I spent 10 years building an empire to prove to myself it was worth it. It wasn't. There was a time when hearing that might have broken me all over again. Now it just landed. If you're watching and you've ever gotten an apology years too late, you know it doesn't automatically fix anything, but it can loosen something that's been clenched inside you. If you feel that, let me know in the comments with just one word, loosened. We'll understand. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't deserve that. But I am asking, can I meet them properly? Not as a scandal, as their father. I stared at him for a long moment. You don't get to claim a title you ran from, I said. Not without work. I know, he whispered. Latch me to the work. He didn't promise perfection. He didn't swear the world would magically rearrange itself. He just looked tired. Human, ready to stop running. One meeting, I said at last. Somewhere safe. If they don't want to stay, we leave. No guilt, no pressure. He nodded, relief and fear colliding in his eyes. Thank you. This isn't for you, I reminded him. This is for them. They deserve to see who you really are, not just who I remember you to be. As I walked out of that cafe, the air felt different. Not lighter, just honest. For the first time in 10 years, the story wasn't stuck. It was moving even if I didn't know yet where it would end. We chose the park behind the library for the first meeting. Neutral ground, open sky, no chandeliers, no microphones, no history dressed in sequins. The kids were nervous. I could feel it in the way they stuck a little closer than usual, in the way Luke kept smoothing the edge of his notebook with his thumb. He's just a man, I said quietly as we walked. Whatever else the world says, he's just a man you get to form your own opinion about. Ramon was already there when we arrived, hands in his pockets. No phone out, no distraction. Hi, he said, voice rough. Thank you for coming. Beverly nodded politely. Hello. Carlton glared without hiding it. Luke just stared, expression unreadable. Can we sit? I suggested. We chose a picnic table. The wood was worn, initials carved into it from other people's brave beginnings. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Beverly cleared her throat. Mom said we could ask questions. Yes, I said. Anything. She turned to him. Why didn't you come when we were born? He swallowed. Because I was a coward, he said quietly. I thought success would excuse my fear. It didn't. Carlton jumped in, anger sparking. Do you know how many times kids at school ask where our dad was? Do you know how many times we had to just shrug? I don't, Ramon said. But I know I earned every one of those questions. Luke's voice was soft but devastating. Why did you leave her? Ramon closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. I thought I could come back when I was ready, he said. I told myself I'd return when I had more to offer. But every year it got harder to face what I'd done. So I didn't, and that was the worst choice of my life. The kids sat with that. No instant forgiveness. No movie-style hugs. Just information. And the right to decide what to do with it. If you appreciate stories that don't skip over the messy middle, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this kind of journey. Around here, we don't rush the hard parts, we honor them. Over the next weeks, contact grew in small, cautious steps. Ramon came to Carlton's debate, standing quietly in the back. He attended Beverly's recital without trying to take credit for her talent. He listened to Luke explain architecture and space, asking questions instead of steering the conversation back to himself. I watched from the sidelines, not as a woman hoping for romance, but as a mother measuring consistency. One evening, after the kids had gone inside, he lingered by the gate. I want to be better than the man I was, he said softly. Then keep showing up, I replied. Words got us here. Actions are what get us out. If you want the final chapter New Year's morning 1 year later when silence finally feels like peace and not punishment, stay with me. And if this story has held your heart this far, like, comment and subscribe so you're here when the next one begins. I used to think progress was a straight line. You hurt, you heal, you move on. Life laughed at that. The months after that first meeting with Ramon didn't feel like a miracle. They felt like a series of small tests. Some days he passed. Some days I waited for him to fail. He started showing up more, never unannounced, never demanding. He'd text, "Can I come by after school?" instead of assuming he was welcome. He missed certain corporate events to watch Carlton debate or Luke build impossible cities of blocks. The kids noticed. So did I. Still, part of me stayed braced like a woman who had learned the hard way that consistency can be a prelude to disappearance. One afternoon, Ruth came home with grocery bags and a piece of news she delivered like it was nothing. He signed a lease, she said, sliding vegetables onto the counter. For what? I asked. A small house, she replied. 3 streets from the school. I blinked. He's moving here? Not a penthouse, she added. Just a place with a yard and squeaky floors. He said that's what kids remember anyway. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice not to betray how much that detail mattered. Later, when he confirmed it himself, almost shyly my reply was honest. Location doesn't fix history, Ramon. I know, he texted back, but it gives me fewer excuses. Public attention took longer to move on. Articles still surfaced, recycling the same photos from the gala. The story shifted over time, from secret family to rebuilding father, depending on who was writing it. At school, some parents whispered, Others offered tight, sympathetic smiles. One afternoon, a reporter cornered us just outside the gates. "Carlton," she said, shoving a microphone near his face, "how does it feel having a billionaire father?" He stared at her like she'd mispronounced his name. "I've always had a father," he said. "He just wasn't around. That's not a title you earn with money." The clip went viral in small circles. People called him brave. I just called him honest. Luke found peace in the details. He'd walked to Ramon's new house with a backpack full of notebooks, returning with new sketches and random facts about engineering. "Did you know bridges are designed to move a little?" He told me once, eyes bright. "They're not supposed to be rigid. That's how they stay standing." I thought about that all night, about how maybe hearts work the same. Beverly took the longest to thaw. She watched everything, the late arrivals, the early exits, the promises made and kept. Then one Sunday afternoon, she knocked on my bedroom door. "Can I ask him to listen to my new piece?" she said. "You can ask him anything," I replied. "You don't need my permission to test his." She invited him to the community center where an old upright piano lived in the corner. He sat in the second row, hands folded, saying nothing. She played. Every note was careful and strong, like she was building a bridge made only of sound. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for a moment. "That was beautiful," he said. "What do you call it?" "I don't know yet," she replied. He thought for a moment. "How about almost home?" She studied him, eyes searching his face the way mine once had. "Maybe," she said softly. That night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "He listens differently now." "Do you trust it?" I asked. "Not yet," she admitted. "But I hear it." I understood. Sometimes the ear forgives before the heart does. My turn came on a quiet evening after dinner at his new place. The kids had drifted to the living room, arguing amicably over a board game. I stayed in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, watching him rinse plates, sleeves rolled up. "Why did you move here, really?" I asked. He dried his hands slowly. "Because I was tired of being a visiting character in my own children's lives." "And if the board calls?" I pressed. "If investors complain? If a crisis hits at 6 p.m. on a school night?" He met my eyes. "Then I tell them what I should have told them 10 years ago. Some things are not negotiable." "My children are one of them." I studied him. His voice was calm, not grand, not rehearsed. "You can't promise never to mess up," I said. "You're right," he replied. "I can't. But I can promise this. I won't disappear again. Not when it's hard. Not when it's messy. Not when it would be easier to run. It wasn't the kind of vow you write on greeting cards. It was the kind that lives or dies on ordinary Tuesdays. Outside, the sky was starting to blush toward winter. Carlton called from the living room. "Dad, it's your turn." Ramon glanced at me, asking for permission with his eyes. I nodded. "Go," I said. "You're up." A year had nearly passed since the night I'd said his name in that ballroom. We were not who we'd been then. None of us. Healing had not come as a straight line. It had come as a circle bringing us back to the same dates, the same holidays, the same questions, just with slightly softer answers each time. New Year's was coming again. This time we wouldn't be walking into a hall built on his image. We'd be walking into a living room built on all of ours. New Year's morning arrived without glitter. Just a pale sky, a chill in the air, and the smell of pancakes from a kitchen that finally sounded like home. Ruth hummed as she flipped batter on the stove. The kids shuffled into the living room in mismatched pajamas, hair going in every direction. "Happy New Year," I said, kissing each forehead as they passed. Ramon was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, trying and failing to assemble a lopsided bookshelf with Luke's help. "Instructions are overrated," he muttered. "Maybe for you," Luke said. "Not for the shelf." Beverly sprawled on the couch with a journal. Carlton flicked through channels half-heartedly, landing on a station that showed the city's fireworks highlights from midnight. We hadn't gone out. We'd watched from the small front yard, wrapped in blankets, the kids leaning against whichever adult was closest. The fireworks had been smaller from here, but no less beautiful. Now, in the calm light of morning, everything felt settled. Not perfect, just settled. After breakfast, the kids raced to get ready for a walk. Ruth shooed us all out. "Go," she said. "Leave an old woman to her tea in peace." We ended up on Ramon's small front porch as the neighborhood slowly woke up around us. It was quiet in that way only the first day of the year knows how to be hopeful and fragile. "Remember last year?" he asked, leaning on the railing. "I try not to live there," I replied. He nodded. "Feet. I thought of that ballroom, of his silence, then heavy with denial, fear, unspoken apologies. I looked at him now in this modest house with paint chipped near the doorframe and kids' shoes scattered on the mat. Your silence feels different today, I said. Hope so. Less like avoidance, I replied. More like peace. The screen door creaked open behind us. Beverly stepped out, pulling on her jacket. She looked at him for a long moment, this man who had broken something in our story and then spent a year learning how to mend what he could. You don't have to go back to your old place, do you? She asked. He shook his head. No, she nodded once. Good. You can stay. 3 words. No drama. Just permission from the one who had waited the longest to give it. His eyes filled before he could stop them. He looked away, blinking hard, but the tears escaped anyway. Thank you, he whispered. Carlton appeared behind her. Are we walking or not? Luke squeezed past them, already adjusting his scarf. Mom, can we go by the park? Yes, I said, voice thick. We can go by the park. Ramon reached for my hand then. Not to claim me, just to steady himself. I let him. As we walked down the sidewalk, 5 of us moving in an uneven line, I realized something quietly monumental. We were no longer the family he left. We were the family we had chosen to become. The world would always remember the scandal, the triplets, the gala, the billionaire who went silent. But we would remember something else, the mornings afterward, the ordinary days. The way forgiveness didn't erase what happened, but loosened its grip enough to let us breathe again. Back home, as the day wore on and the noise of the world slowly returned, there were still moments of quiet between us. Not the suffocating silence of 10 years ago. Not the shocked, frozen silence of that ballroom. This was different. This was the silence of people who no longer needed to prove anything. That night, after the kids fell asleep, Beverly with her journal on her chest, Carlton clutching a comic book, Luke with a sketch of a bridge on his nightstand eyes, stood at the window and watched the sky darken. Ramon came to stand beside me. We made it, he said softly. We're making it, I corrected. 1 year doesn't erase 10, but it's a good start. He nodded. Thank you for letting me try. I smiled, not at the man he had been, but at the one standing here now. You did the trying, I said. We did the choosing. Outside, a lone firework light stubborn burst in the distance. It glittered briefly, then faded. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or headlines. It just sits down beside you one ordinary day and stays long enough for you to recognize it. We were not perfect. We were not healed in some magical, complete way. But we were together by choice. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. The woman who once walked into a ballroom with shaking hands and 3 children at her side now stood in a small, cluttered home with the same 3 children and a man who had finally learned how to stay. The silence between us hummed softly, not empty, not dangerous, just home.